Ah yes, regional variants. A creative way for Game Freak to revisit old favorites and make them objectively better in every way, shape, and form, right? Yeah, not really. In fact, many regional forms accomplish the exact opposite. So in this video, I'm going to be pitting every single regional form against each other to find out who is truly superior. So good morning everybody, good morning, it's JPR, and here is every Pokemon versus their regional counterpart. So starting with the region that of course introduced regional forms, Alola, we have 10 families to analyze. Beginning with everybody's favorite normal type rodent, Raticate. Yeah, I'm not gonna spend time breaking down the base forms, you know you clicked on this video for the evolved guys anyway. Obviously, Raticate has never been a great Pokemon, even in Gen 1 where normal types were more cracked than a South Carolina highway road, as it's pretty much always been outclassed by better normal types. But starting in Gen 4, after Flame Orb and Toxic Orb were introduced to work in tandem with its ability Guts, Raticate gained a small niche in the lower tiers competitive play as a decently strong glass cannon. Perhaps the term glass pistol is more appropriate. Between Facade, Sucker Punch, and Swords Dance, Raticate is a Pokemon that is actually somewhat threatening now. Meanwhile, Alolan Raticate trades some of its attack and speed for a bit more bulk, which honestly just gives it really middling stats that make it succeed at nothing in particular. Hustle Swords Dance can work as a powerful combination if you don't mind missing 20% of the time, and it actually paired really nicely with Gen 7's resident gimmick Z moves, which never missed, making Alolan Raticate good enough to pull off one-time nukes per battle. But seeing as how Z moves are now gone, so is Alolan Raticate's main selling point. So I think I slightly favor Cantonian Raticate in this matchup. Unfortunately, our next matchup isn't nearly as interesting as its original Raichu versus Alolan Raichu, and quite frankly, Alolan Raichu is just a slightly better copy. As a psychic type, it has an extra type to gain stab moves from, and it doesn't really mind the extra weaknesses since Raichu is already an incredibly frail Pokemon as is, and they slightly rebalance its stats to make it a better special attacker, which just fits Raichu's move pool a lot better, so yeah, Alolan Raichu comfortably wins this one. Next up, we have two Pokemon who are truly having a mid-off. Sandslash and Alolan Sandslash. Do you think researchers in Alola ever wonder why this Pokemon is called Sandslash? And honestly, despite the fact that Alolan Sandslash is a typing that makes it weak to, well, everything, it actually has a lot more tools in its arsenal. Triple Axle, Ice Spinner, Slush Rush, and the benefits of the newly buffed snow weather condition actually make this Pokemon a decent snow sweeper. Cantonian Sandslash can kinda do the same thing with Sand Rush, but really lacks the move pool to do it as effectively. So Alolan wins once again. This next one might be the most obvious one yet, because Alolan Ninetales absolutely washes the original, which is crazy considering the original has drought. But sadly, post Gen 5 weather nerf, Ninetales has been in a drought, and things only got worse when Torkoal was given the same ability in Gen 7, basically putting Ninetales in the permanent unemployment line. Alolan Ninetales, on the other hand, is certainly the best snow setter in the game. It can set Aurora Veil to block damage, it can fight back with a combination of Freeze Dry and Moonblast. It's honestly just a solid all-around Pokemon. But while it may seem like Alola is on a winning streak, just temper your expectations, Gen 7 fans. Because next, we have to talk about Alolan Dugtrio. Perhaps the most nothing burger regional form both in terms of design and usability. Once upon a time, Cantonian Dugtrio actually became such a good lead in Gen 5 OU and much of early Gen 6 that it got its own ability of Arena Trap banned from singles play. And since then, this Pokemon has been struggling to pay the rent ever since. Maybe if not for that unfortunate series of events, Dugtrio could still be great today. I mean, it still kinda is in Ubers, it's actually really good at trapping and KOing Eternatus. However, seeing as how Cantonian was actually so good that it got Arena Trap banned, and the Alolan one doesn't have Arena Trap at all, I actually think Cantonian wins this one. Next up we have the Meowth family, who has not 2, but 3 regional forms. So we also have to factor Berserker into this competition as well. But to make things easier, I'll just go ahead and rip the band-aid off and say that the winner is not Cantonian Persian. That guy has been washed since Gen 2. Alolan Persian and Berserker could not possibly be any more different though. Alolan Persian is a fast, support-oriented dark type, while Berserker is a slow, physical tank that can deal massive steel-type damage due to its ability Steely Spirit. On paper, Berserker looked like the one that was better designed for VGC, since Steely Spirit also raises the power of your ally steel-type moves. But in practice, Berserker just didn't have the bulk to stick around for long. Alolan Persian, on the other hand, actually saw a moderate amount of VGC success in Gen 7. Its speed made it a phenomenal fake-out, parting shot, and taunt user. Does that remind you of any other Gen 7 cat? Fur Coat actually doubles this Pokemon's mediocre defense stat to a respectable level, and it can even use Foul Play to get around its own bad attack stat. Neither of these cats are particularly great in the singles meta, but I think Alolan Persian's VGC history easily cements it as the best member of the Meowth family. Okay, for Golem, I honestly feel like a detailed breakdown of these dudes is a waste of time because it is trash versus garbage over here. Alolan Golem has better coverage and less weaknesses though, so I guess he wins? That's all the effort I'm gonna put into this one. Muck versus Alolan Muck is likewise pretty easy. This is kind of a repeat of Raichu versus Alolan Raichu. They are basically the exact same Pokemon, but Alolan Muck getting dark just makes it so much tankier and it gets stab knockoff, so yay. Now Exeggutor is a much more interesting comparison, because at first the Alolan form seemed like the clear winner. Old Exeggutor had fallen off incredibly hard, Grass Dragon was so much better typing that it wasn't even funny, and having access to Draco Meteor is always a good thing. And then the craziest thing happened. Cantonian Exeggutor kinda started being decent again in Gen 9 VGC. I mean, it's always had the tools, Chlorophyll, Expanding Force, Sleep Powder, and as a result, it became a somewhat popular teammate for Torkoal and Indeedee, while Alolan Exeggutor kinda struggles to fit into most teams. It doesn't really have a great niche in singles or doubles, so this is a rare W for the original form. Unfortunately, it's short-lived though, because our last Alolan form, Marowak, is so much better than the Kanto version, it's almost disgusting. Alolan Marowak has incredible typing, and thanks to Lightning Rod, it actually has 3 immunities, which means it's really good at switching into sketchy situations. Something that original Marowak never really had the bulk nor the typing to do. It also gets Stab, Poltergeist, and Flare Blitz, both incredibly powerful moves that should score easy KOs. Yeah, Alolan Marowak is pretty good. So moving on to our first Galarian form, I guess not counting Berserker from earlier, we have Rapidash. Yikes. I say that because, like Golem, both of these forms are so irrelevant that it's really hard to say which one is definitively worse. One is a bad Calm Mind Sweeper, and the other is a bad support Pokemon with Will-O-Wisp and Morning Sun. It's basically just Diet Arcanine. Yeah, I'm going tie on this one. They're both not great. Ah, great. The Slowpoke family is next, so we actually had to do these separately. Surprisingly, original Slowbro is actually significantly better than Galarian Slowbro, at least in most formats. And that's despite the fact that the Galarian version has better typing. Surprisingly, this is one of the few times where water pairs worse with a type than another type does. But the main difference is that the Cantonian version is actually a lot bulkier because the Galarian form puts a ton of points into its attack stat for literally no reason. Like, why? Shell Side Arm isn't even a physical move. Why did they just mess its stat distribution up? Also, hey, OG Slowbro is getting his Mega back soon, hopefully. We don't know that for sure, but if he does, then yeah, no competition. Meanwhile, Galarian Slowking is certainly better than the OG. Not by a lot, they are certainly more evenly matched than the Slowbro forms, but Galarian Slowking has not budged from the OU tier since it was introduced nearly 5 years ago. That's a very impressive streak. And I guess the difference maker is that they actually balanced the Galar version stats properly this time. They took points out of its attack to make it hit slightly harder on the special side, and that does make a surprising difference. And again, Poison Psychic is actually a very solid combination of 2 rather unremarkable types. They resist Fairy, they absorb toxic spikes off the field, they can't be poisoned by common threats like Glamora and Clodsire, so really the Galarian version is just slightly more versatile across the board. Up next, Farfetch'd. Yeah, the one that evolves wins. Shocker. Next in line we have Corsola. Yeah, the one that evolves wins. Shocker. Who do we have next? Oh, it's Mr. Mime! Yeah, the one that evolves. Now, as for the Zigzagoon family, this one is actually quite funny, because yes, while Obstagoon is undoubtedly better than Hoennian Linoon, who just can't evolve, comparing Linoon strictly to its Galar counterpart, the Hoenn version is actually so much better because it gets Belly Drum and Extreme Speed, which they had to take away from the Galar version because it would have made Obstagoon 2 broken, especially with having Guts as an ability. Gosh, could you even imagine? Okay, so actually resuming the video here, we have Weezing versus its Galarian counterpart. And on paper, this seems like another Muck versus Alolan Muck situation where they're the same Pokemon, but one has slightly better typing. Except, not really. There are actually a ton of situations where one form is better than the other depending on whether or not you want the Galar version Steel weakness. And the result is that you have two forms that are actually rather fluid and interchangeable. At this exact moment, it appears the Galarian form is trending to be more popular than the original since it double resists many of the meta's popular fighting types right now, but this one isn't nearly as black and white as the other matchups. OMG, he mentioned Gen 5, remakes confirmed! Speaking of Gen 5, Darmanitan is up next, and man, as much as I love my OG Angry Unova boy, yeah, Guerrilla Tactics is broken, the new Zen mode is broken, the Galar version is just one of the most ridiculous Pokemon ever made. They literally got both forms into Ubers, that's how stupid this Pokemon is. Like bro, look at these stats, somebody thought this was okay. Up next is Runerigus, who is just Cofagrigus with its attack and special attack flipped, and yeah, this Pokemon is still bad. Surprisingly, Cofagrigus actually does have a VGC history behind it though, mostly because it could use Mummy to erase the really broken abilities that various Mega Evolutions and other Pokemon used to have. Wandering Spirit is a similar ability, but it only trades the ability with the opponent, which sounds nice until you realize they can just trade it back. So it doesn't have the lasting value that Mummy does. So for that reason alone, Cofagrigus is better. Runerigus' ground type also doesn't help it in any real ways because it's primarily used as a bulky Trick Room setter, and the last thing you want in one of those is more weaknesses. Anyway, who's next on the list? Oh, it's Stunfisk. I completely forgot I'd have to talk about this thing. Anyway, Galarian Stunfisk is a lot better in Pokemon Go PvP mode, so let's just go with that. And before we close the page in the Galar region, our last three to discuss are of course the legendary birds. Numero uno is Articuno, who despite being the absolute laughingstock of legendary Pokemon for decades, has been on a remarkable upswing the past couple years, ever since the change from hail to snow was made. And surprisingly, Articunos that just combine Snow Cloak with Bright Powder and say, haha, you can't hit me, are actually pretty good. The addition of heavy-duty boots on the single side in Gen 8 also made Articuno immune to its biggest foe, Stealth Rocks. Meanwhile, Galarian Articuno, much like Galarian Rapidash, is only good for being a really bad Calm Mind sweeper. Galarian Zapdos is a similar story. Although it's close to even, or maybe even marginally better than the original Zapdos in recent VGC formats, in singles, the competition is nowhere remotely close, as Cantonian Zapdos clears this Roadrunner like the Roadrunner clears Wile E. Coyote. Zapdos Original has pretty much always been revered as the ultimate support bird in competitive singles, and that doesn't look to change anytime soon. The one regional form that does win out over the original is Galarian Moltres. But even then, not by much, as Cantonian Moltres, much like Articuno, has experienced a meteoric rise through the tier list in the past few generations. In fact, the original Moltres is marginally better than its Galarian brother in singles at this moment. But combining formats over the years, the Galarian version has seen slightly more usage, thanks to its great signature move Fiery Wrath in tandem with superior defensive typing. But overall, the original legendary birds appear to have aged rather gracefully. Okay, so moving forward into Hisuian and Paldean, in an effort to speed things up, if any regional form evolves but the original doesn't, like Hisuian Quillfish for example, I'm just not even going to talk about it, just assume that the one that evolves is better. But our first Hisuian form is none other than my boy, Arcanine, who sadly seems to have been displaced by his own ancestor. Oh, the irony. Yes, despite the fact that everyone assumed that Fire Rock would be the ultimate downfall of Hisuian Arcanine, in truth, it actually gives Arcanine so much more firepower with the move Head Smash now at its disposal. And with the advent of Terrestrialization, Hisuian Arcanine gets all the benefits of its superb offensive typing, with none of the downsides of its many weaknesses. Honestly, the Hisuian version is just the original Arcanine, but more versatile across the board. If you want to run an Intimidate support set, it can still do that. If you want to kill things with Terra Normal Extreme Speed, it has more attack to do so. If you want to run Rockhead to negate Flare Blitz and Head Smash recoil, well, original Arcanine just can't do that at all. It's pretty much strictly an upgrade, which I feel very conflicted about as an Arcanine truther. Much like Hisuian Electrode, who, don't get me wrong, absolutely still sucks, but at the end of the day, it's just Electrode with better coverage. It's the same song and dance for Hisuian Typhlosion, who despite being slightly slower than Johto Typhlosion, is able to hit just a touch harder and has the benefits of being a ghost type, which is almost always an improvement. Unfortunately, Decidueye learned that the hard way, as its Hisuian form lost Ghost for the much more situationally useful fighting type, but honestly, Hisuian Decidueye kinda ended up being a beast in Scarlet and Violet Regulation H. It absolutely sucks in singles though, so in all honesty, this one probably just evens out. As for the last starter, Hisuian Samurott is strictly just miles better than the original Samurott. Between sharpness, ceaseless edge, the dark typing, and higher attack and speed, there is no universe where the original Samurott is better competitively speaking than the Hisuian version. Sneasler vs. Weavile is a far more interesting matchup though. Despite being entirely different species, they are quite comparable as they fulfill the same role as glass cannons. And while Weavile is still plenty good in various formats, Sneasler is just outright broken. This guy pretty much became the new Urshifu in Regulation H, and it was very quickly banned to Ubers in the singles meta, a land that Weavile could never even dream of reaching. Cleavor is next, and hey man, thanks for playing, but you got replaced with Caesar for a reason. Caesar is just too good, you're not beating him. Hisuian Lilligant is another powerful upgrade as it completely reinvented the rather middling Pokemon of Univin Lilligant into a powerful physical sweeper, giving it the signature move of Victory Dance, which pretty much does all the work for it. If Victini does not get this move in Gen 10, I'm gonna crash out though. Hisuian Zoroark is likewise yet another improvement on the original, and yeah, part of that is just that its stats are better distributed, but mostly, normal Ghost just pairs so much better with its illusion ability. Having 3 immunities makes it so much easier for this Pokemon to take advantage of its ability to confuse and deceive its foes. Unfortunately for the original, Dark being a relatively neutral type that only resists 2 types and is immune to just Psychic, which is no longer a popular offensive type, just means that it's not getting much out of that illusion. Hisuian Braviary on paper looks like another small upgrade with, again, better coverage, slightly better stat distribution, and that's about it. However, Univin Braviary actually did have a pretty successful VGC run back in Gen 7 and 8, as a relatively bulky Tailwind setter that could also threaten Tyranitar and Incineroar with close combat. Of course, the Hisuian form didn't exist back then, and while the Hisuian form is ever so slightly better in singles, I think overall this actually goes to Univin Braviary. Yes, the Hisuian form has Expanding Force, which is certainly nice, but Univin has Defiant, which is great for doubles. It has Close Combat, which hits more threatening Pokemon. I know neither are great enough Pokemon to warrant a discussion lasting this long, but this is a rare case where I think the original form actually wins. Anyway, Hisuian Goodra is just Goodra, but they remembered to actually make it bulky this time and give it a good secondary typing, so not much to discuss on that front. The Hisuian version is almost always better. Hisuian Avalugg. What happened, bro? You were already based on one of the worst fully evolved Pokemon of all time. The bar was so low, and somehow you did not clear it. Instead, Game Freak decided, hey, let's give him more weaknesses, even less special defense, and then Strong Jaw's a new ability in case he wants to use Ice Fang or Crunch for some reason. Spoiler alert, he doesn't. He will never use those moves. Yeah, this is just a fat L for Hisui, maybe the biggest L for all regional forms. This one was a colossal flop. And now for Paldea, thank goodness we only have 2. First up is Paldean Wooper, so we'll be comparing Quagsire to Clodsire. Quagsire is a weird Pokemon. Like many water ground types, its viability kind of fluctuates depending on which Pokemon are dominating the meta at the current moment. But in our extremely small sample size so far, Clodsire just feels like a much more future-proofed Pokemon. It's one of the few who still has access to Toxic. Water Absorb is actually just a fantastic ability in this Pokemon, as it turns a weakness into an immunity, which allows Poison Ground to be a way better typing than it would normally be. It is so much bulkier than the original Quagsire, doesn't have a double weakness so it doesn't have to worry about surprise grass moves or grass terras like Quagsire. Yeah, I think Claude comfortably wins this one. As for Tauros, yes, obviously all 3 Paldean forms are better. They are basically the same Pokemon with better typing. The real question is, which one of the 3 reigns supreme? And for the moment, it appears to be the Aqua breed of Tauros, as it is really hard to find a Pokemon who walls out a strong water-fighting attacker, and this has proven to be the case in both singles and VGC this generation. Both Blaze Breed and Aqua Breed were very popular in Regulation H, but Aqua Breed almost always had the edge. Not to mention, it pairs so nicely with Rain, which was definitely the dominant weather condition in Regulation H. So in total, if I have counted correctly, we have 26 regional variants winning over their original versions, 11 where the originals were actually better than their revisions, and 3 where it appears to roughly be a tie. So I guess the good news is, if your favorite Pokemon is getting a regional variant, there's about a 67% chance that it will be an improvement. So with that being said, which regional form do you think is the best improvement? Let me know in the comment section down below. But don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you guys next time.